Okay, so let's fire away. I think first of all, Megan, just quickly, if you can introduce yourself, what you do and stuff, because we know Charles and Ryan and so forth, so
cool.
appreciate that.
Thanks, Jacques. Jacques could be on the panel this morning, so I haven't heard much. But so I, at the moment, wear two hats. So I, training in evolutionary biology, actually went into data science in 2012, so quite a long time ago. Started a company called MIIA. We've done a lot of really cool machine learning type solutions for banks, insurance companies. We work across the continent. And I'm wearing another hat here today, and I'd like to kind of talk about it a little bit. But from what we've seen in like data science and working as consultants mostly across the continent is that there's this kind of view that Africans don't have the skills to solve problems. And there's still a view that you need to bring in consultants from Europe and America and that to do this kind of work, like this machine learning work. And over the years, we've we're in contact with all these amazing AI machine learning communities across the continent, and so we decided to take some of our profits and create a new startup, and it's called Zindi, and it's a competition platform for AI machine learning problems. And it's really about empowering Africans to solve problems and to kind of change this mindset to show that we have the skills and the abilities, but obviously we want the best solutions and to solve African problems. We really want to look at solving challenges that we have on this kind of continent, and that are quite different from problems that you might encounter in America and Europe and things like that in China. So that's what I do. Yeah.
Awesome. And we're actually going to have a discussion afterwards around, because it fits in with the Machine Intelligence Institute of Africa, helping to transform Africa, and it's building a community around data science and AI machine learning, and to create a kind of a Kaggle for Africa. I think that's a fantastic idea, so let's explore. I'm looking forward to that. That's exactly what we want to do. And I think as you think about opportunities and pitfalls of machine learning and what we can do as a community, as Africans here as well, this is the kind of stuff to make it work. So we need visionary leadership and we need execution around those type of things. Okay, so I think we had some really thoughtful discussions, Ryan, you as well, and Charles. And I like about that because you need to look at the big picture, where things are going as well. So, and think about the future of work as well. So maybe let's just talk about that a little bit. I want to get into other things as well. And I also want to say, let's open it up to, if you feel you want to ask something, please do. Just raise your hand and we'll address those questions as well. So we keep it very interactive. We want to get the most out of this. So I'm going to lead with some questions, and I want to actually say, if you think about very specific things as well, so I'm going to drive a few things, but if there's things that you want to raise and you want to point to the channel, let's do that as well. And Selena, I know you've got a bunch of ideas and questions as well, so Michael, you as well. So let's keep it very interactive. It's like a group discussion. We're sitting here, but let's talk. So I think you've already alluded to that in your talk, but if you think about, we want to maybe start with opportunities. We need to talk about the pitfalls as well. I think around data privacy and bias, and I think we need to talk through that because that's practical reality, regulation. As a matter of fact, next month in Geneva, Switzerland, I've been invited to another conference that talks about AI regulation policies and stuff, and that's going to be awesome just to hear more about that as well. So I think we need to talk about that as well, that part. But let's just talk about from opportunities. Maybe the future of work is opportunities and pitfalls. We do it wrong, and we're going to mess up. And what does it mean for, so maybe make it real. If we need to give advice to Cyril and Ramaphosa or the government around these type of things, what would be your suggestions? And I think let's talk about it. What would be practical things that we can do around, given scenarios in Africa, South Africa and Africa, the skill set, the infrastructure issues. How do you think about those type of things? Because we don't want to be left behind, and you've got all these billions of dollars being pumped into from a government in China and France. They make it a national strategy, and what do we do as Africans, and specifically in terms of the future of work, and what does it mean? Maybe South Africa's starting with. How do you think about it? It's a loaded question, but
yes, I'm quite an optimist just in terms of what if we can. We have to be strategically wise in the way we approach our technology, because we can get so wrapped up in this technology and can do so much for us. But if we don't think through the applications in the right way, I think we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot. So I just go back to what is in South Africa. What are our differentiators? If I just look at the human capital space, I think our education system is an absolute and unmitigated disaster. And we're continuing to pour money into a broken system. So one of our massive challenges for government, and I don't believe government will solve this, simply because it's politically not a good idea to start pushing buttons, is we should be fundamentally breaking down the entire education system that we currently have. It is a waste of money. And that we should be asking our children to learn in a fundamentally different way. The reason I say that is because my child, for example, is at a private school. She's still, I said that she's still learning parts of history where she has to replicate a date to get a pass. I said to her, please fail this test. I actually agreed to just
wow, that's
fail it,
refreshing.
because it actually is irrelevant. What I want to ask of you is what insights have you got out of that particular issue that can apply to the future? That's all I want you to think around. If I ask you to memorize, fail it, because and you've got my blessing. The challenge is, that's the one. You know? Now I look downstream, and you've got teachers who live on paternalism. They breed off paternalism, so they want to control the message, they want to control the children, and actually, if we carry on with this model, we are having people that have had 12 years of investing in a coding mechanism that puts them at risk. So for me, just to start off with, we have to fundamentally rethink our human coding and social coding systems and unlock people. So we have to turn it on its head. If we can do that bravely, I believe we could transform this country very quickly.
Yeah.
My gut, though, is that the government is a controlling mechanism, and all the systems are too compromised to allow this. So it almost ends up with a revolution construct, and that's unfortunately what happens.
Okay.
Can I just respond a little bit? I mean, I agree on the point that the education system in South Africa is not functioning very well. I'm not convinced that a revolutionary approach towards education is the right way to go. I think there are a lot of politicized issues within education in South Africa. I think education in general in South Africa has never been approached in a evidence-based way. It's largely been approached from dogma. So, and that maybe goes to this rote learning. But I think there's a danger in trying to shift off to the right and not actually take a carefully considered approach to that. And I think we've seen that already in the 2005 curriculum that came through. That was a sudden shift and it was a disaster. That was basically emulating what was the current best thinking in education globally, but didn't take into, and actually has been shown to not function globally either. So if you look at how China is approaching this, how India is approaching this, they're focusing on quite traditional maths and science skills. I would think that would be a very good place to start. Obviously, we need to think 30 years down the line. So if you listen to someone like Jacques, he's saying, well, we shouldn't be educating kids. I think this is similar to what you're saying, right? We shouldn't be educating kids in areas that AI will be better than them at. We should be looking at things like arts and cultural values. I mean, maybe that's true. I would think that ideally we want to be educating them in a way that they can work with machines and with AI, and that's basically the space. And I do think that requires a certain element of STEM training, science, technology, engineering, and maths.
If I can just jump in, so I think if you apply it to our world of data scientists and their skills and that, a lot of guys have come through STEM programs and done data science courses and things like that. That doesn't make them a good data scientist in a business, and that's the kind of the irritation we get from clients is like, oh help, I've hired all these people, they're so smart, they're not helping me solve my problems, and it's because they can't ask the difficult questions, they can't identify challenges to solve. So it's like it'll give you a good foundation.
Certainly not the final answer. I mean, I agree with that. I think what I see at the moment is people coming out of the education system not able to communicate in quantitative way at all.
And it was actually, if you think about the 16th, 21st century skills, dealing with changing environments, dealing with complex environments was identified. And there's critical thinking and all of that, that's part of that and stuff. And all that. I think even the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, all these, that's what they advocate as well. But it is, how do you make it real and practical for our education system? Well, that's a challenge. Anyway, okay, that's good. So let's, please, if you've got questions, most welcome as well. Let's just talk about some of the pitfalls as well. So we just cover both ends. If you think about bias, obviously you guys alluded to some of the controls specifically, but what are the things that we need to look out for that you want to highlight specifically? So I don't know, what do you think about it, even from what you are implementing with, you're trying to address a very specific thing, but if you think about AI, machine learning more generally, what are the pitfalls that you specifically see? In application of AI. So we're assuming that we're automating stuff now, and these systems are going to have a dramatic impact on society and stuff. So it's really about, it's one thing to shape and say, how do we use this and how do we adapt? Clearly we have to, but humans, we're also architects of this automation and stuff. So in terms of that, I mean, what do you see?
So our business is about building a digital brain for a company. So what we'll do is we'll build a digital brain that a chatbot and a human interface can tap into to get a prescriptive outcome. So for example, if it's in a contact center, we know exactly every call journey that you need to follow. We can navigate you through that. In sales, we can navigate you through that. In all the operational decisions, we can navigate you through that. So your job is not actually to know it, and both digital front ends and human front ends can tap into the same digital brain. So that's what we do. The challenge with that is that once you've got that working, so it's prescriptive, it's accurate, it's repetitive, it's compliant. Now you have to change the organizational systems to say, well, if my human beings, that interface is not predominantly spending its time doing what we've been asking it to do, how do we reprogram those? How do we reprogram their jobs? How do we move people in terms of the way they can fundamentally change from here to here rapidly? So we are finding that leadership are struggling with the understanding of a human organizational system. The tech's there. We can get you to ask the right questions. We can sort your first call resolutions out, all of that. We can get it done. How do you now readjust the organizational system that has been geared to doing that work historically? That's, for me, what has proven the most challenging, is that a lot of the execs are totally excited about this full automation. They put a little sort of innovation hub on the side, and they want to literally go and create a digital version of their other, and they're almost the old bank, new bank construct, and then what happens is that this never actually gets anywhere because it's not part of the core. But they're too scared then to embed this into their current, because it's a transformational change. It takes leadership, it takes visionary in terms of that human system, and they're not ready for it. So that's my experience right now, is leadership is not ready to actually embed this into and disrupt their current world. They almost want another world to be disrupted.
I've seen exactly the same kind of thing, so I agree fully with that. And it's for me on multiple levels. So, but it starts there. Well, that's why if you look at the 5 pillars of big data analytics maturity, I think I just briefly alluded to that. One of them is intent, strategy. And the visionary leadership is a critical part. But then there's others as well. You need to look at your data, technology, people, processes. So those 5 things. The IDC and Industrial Data Corporation, those are the things that they call it a maturity landscape. And I'm using that as well when I guide companies in terms of becoming more AI-driven, data-driven, and on the path of smart digital transformation. I think it's very important to look at that, and it starts there. That's a problem. That's a bottleneck. Anyway, so I want to give you, maybe you've done quite a bit of work in marketing and all of those type of things as well. What is your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you some case studies from that. I think that like the pitfall would be the danger of like AI leading to things that are more exclusive and kind of cutting people try to change the thinking around to say, like, let's not use that at all. Let's rather look at patterns of behaviors of people, you know. So you have the opportunity to be more inclusive in that space. Yeah. So my work is more like customers and things like that. But I think it's, you know, as the person creating those models, like you really have to be. You have to ask those kinds of ethical questions. You've got to say, you know, what is the outcome of this? And if it's going to be more exclusive, do I really want to be building that? You know, and I think that's for us to start asking.
That's right. That's part of that architecting solutions and stuff. There's a big responsibility from the AI companies as well to do it right. And if you think about the top AI, well, if you think about the top tech, the biggest companies in the world, they're all vying for the AI throne. You've got governments, you've got those kind of companies, so there's a massive responsibility. So it's very interesting about this whole, I don't know if you've watched the hearing on Facebook, it was fascinating how he was kind of, all those questions, he was peppered with all sorts of interesting questions. Some questions that was, anyway, there were some good questions as well. And it's important things to answer, and he wasn't able to answer that everything in a proper way as well. So that is very important, and it affects their business models and all of that. So it's a very, but I think our companies here in South Africa and Africa as well, I think we've got an important role to play it's great to hear that. So Charles, you are into the whole data science space, but you also think about the social implications of all of that, so I'm sure you've got...
Yeah, I mean, so just thinking about the Facebook hearings, one of the areas that I'm concerned about is that you end up with these large companies that hold very sensitive and important data, and they haven't been elected by anybody. They haven't participated in any kind of democratic process. Is that right or is that wrong? And you know, traditionally, what seems to happen with large conglomerates is that they end up getting broken down. You can see this if you look at railway companies in the US, and traditionally that's what happened. I'm not sure how that's going to work with you know, going back to the data regulations. That answer needs to be participated in a democratic way. And I think what complicates this is a little bit what Ryan was alluding to, is that these systems actually create these echo chambers within themselves. So, and you see this coming after election results. And that, I think, is going to feed back into the democratic process. So it's a complicated social question, actually, as how does data ownership thereof start impacting on our, or at least the democratic system's ability to actually function and feedback in and on.
Just to maybe comment a little bit on that.
Comment and then there.
Apologies, sorry.
No, it's fine.
We've been talking a lot, so. But I think for me, one of the areas I'm concerned a little bit about is that there are humans' psychological weaknesses. We were alluding to those triggers that we can be set off. So Facebook's playing to all of that. They've got deep psychology in their technology, and it is largely manipulative. Actually, they know exactly how human being psychology is working, and they're playing on the triggers and the reinforcements, etc. Concern I have is that those are then played on for purposes that are not in society's benefit or the individual's benefit, and because the patterns can start moving and reinforce, it actually can become quite manipulative, and I think that's a huge journey we've got to go on. Is how does the human mind engage with this technology that is knowing it better and better, and then is shaping it quicker and quicker, and then who's in charge? And I think that's going to be a real journey for all of us, is learning about understanding ourselves better. We actually, many of myself included, have got no understanding of ourselves. And so we have no real understanding of what this technology is doing to us. And I think part of our journey is a far better realization of self, so that we can engage with this technology and not allow it to play on triggers that it's in our subconscious we're not even aware of.
I think where it becomes very dangerous, you think about in China, you've got a government that's controlling its citizens. Yeah. That is a scary scenario, very scary. That's for me not part of a better future. So I'm very scared. And I think it was quite interesting if you listen to the US Congress, the AI hearings, that the partnership on partnership on AI there. OpenAI was represented. There was a bunch of others as well. And they were raising these kind of concerns because in the US that's completely different to the values and things that are there as well. So and you want to shape. And obviously, the US has got such an important role, leadership role in terms of this. So they've got currently the biggest companies in the world, the biggest AI companies in the world, and they can help shape a better future, set the agenda. So, but there's a big concern that the technologies will be misused. And obviously, we can still talk about other things like weaponized AI and regulation. We're going to talk about regulation. We're going to talk about privacy and stuff like that. But I want to give that gentleman a quick question. Maybe introduce yourself as well. Yes.
Yes, sure. Stephen Hall.
Stephen.
I'm a technologist, so I'm interested in coming this subject from that viewpoint. But my question, I suppose, follows on from the discussion about Facebook and control of data and that sort of thing. And being somebody who's kind of hands-on with technology, a concern which I have, particularly thinking about us sitting here in South Africa and so on, is the fact that there are these large, huge global players who are, if you like, moved down one layer below the Facebook and the data, who actually control the infrastructure. I'm talking about the Googles, the Amazons, the Microsofts and so on, who are building these massive clouds and deploying AI tools and components and so on. And they're all, there's this tremendous race going on at the moment to be the claim territory and so on. And these things are all physically residing somewhere else in the world. They're controlled by someone else. What are the implications? This is my question. What are the implications for us here? Are we always going to be dependent on something deployed, hosted elsewhere, developed elsewhere? To what extent can we create our own? Is it realistic?
That's an awesome question, and we are actively doing things about this. And I think what we are talking about, the African data sets, is one area as well. But from a Cortex Logic side, what we are specifically also looking at is, if you look at the healthcare space, that the government don't want, in general, they don't want the data to be hosted somewhere else. It needs to be kept here. Think about the African genome. There's great opportunities. So it's actually discussions now with the South African Medical Research Council, universities, big hospitals, and where we're looking at hosting it here. And obviously Azure and Amazon is coming. They're going to have data centers here, which is going to be great. We're looking forward to that. We're working with Microsoft specifically also on all part of this discussions as well. So I think it's in the works to create host data here, and then we can create our own analytics. And then the African genome is very valuable as well. And then we can monetize that as well from here, and we can control things better and make sure that all the stakeholders here can benefit from that. But so the good thing is there are active discussions around these kind of things. But the fact of the matter is, you've got still the Facebooks. Well, those guys are very influential. If I think about Naspers, well, they're struggling. A lot of these local, thinking about advertising, Google and Facebook, they're controlling advertising. So how do you counter that as well? It's not easy. Yes, Nick, go for it.
I'm Nick Bradshaw. I'm the director at AI Expo. One of the debates that we had at the Deep Learning X event was around ethics in AI, and one of the conversations was very much around that we've all been exposed to manipulative information, proprietors, newspapers. I spent 7 months in the UK last year, and the country's turned into this polarised group of people who are conflagrating history because of the manipulation around Brexit, and now they've all voted to get out of Europe because of it. So I think it was a post in LinkedIn the other week where maybe we can turn this technology around, where rather than being a human editor that's deciding what we read, what we see on the television, that we have an authentication, a blockchain of information where a source is known, it's proven, it's there, it's traceable, and therefore the news that we get is real. And then it's not fake anymore. So a blockchain, television-driven channel, or radio channel, or whatever it is, so that what you hear is real. And I think that question around infrastructure, maybe the editors of what we sort of hear and see are no longer newspapers, and they're going to be the people owning the infrastructure because they can decide on what goes in and what comes out. So how do you how do you do that? And I think the blockchain, I think you mentioned earlier on, AI doesn't sit on its own. You've got blockchain, IoT, data source,
smart technologies.
The whole thing comes together. But if we can authenticate the information and then it's there for everyone to see, so who's your source? That, of course, the newspapers say, we can't tell you that. But now I can go and see who that source is, and it's there. And okay, their name might be redacted because of protection and safety, but at least you know that that's where that information is coming from. So I think, I don't know, just something to throw it back, because it's quite a big debate.
No, that's awesome. Yes.
So, what does the panel think about even if you could identify what's true, the fact that people don't care? So Trump has proved liar. Nobody cares.
It's unbelievable. Okay, so let's tackle that. I think there's a few things that I also wanted to talk about. So I want to give opportunities to the panel to respond to that. So let's just talk about traceability, truth, fake. How do we counter that, and what do we do with that? So let's talk about that. I want to also talk about data privacy as well. So let's cover that. So what do you guys think?
So I can probably comment on it. The rest I won't hear from what you're saying. But I think for me, it's just an illustration of the stress the societies are under, and that we've passed our ability to cope with this level of change. So we are just becoming very, we're driving our decision making absolutely on on our low brain models. We really are not thinking at all as society, and it's I think we're at quite a risk level in terms of the ability to move opinions quite quickly. I think my gut is that over the next couple of decades we hopefully will see an emergence of a greater consciousness in society, where we will actually start being forced to ask systemic questions. We're going to see the implications of a decision I made and the ripple effects. And I think my hope for the human species in an optimistic space is that we actually do start engaging far more in terms of the consciousness, simply through the consequences of us operating currently at these stress levels. My gut, though, is over the next period we are going to see more of it. Actually, more manipulation, more non-rational decision making, and almost bizarre decision making, simply because our systems are under threat. People are going to start losing more jobs. As the shift happens, we're going to have to start realigning. That whole stress system, I think, is going to create far more extremism, far more simplistic behavior. And then there's going to come a tipping point where we're actually going to have to start moving into a new consciousness. And I don't know where that will be, but that's my gut.
Yep. Charles?
So without going into too much depth, but deep interest of mine is social network analysis. And one of the things that you see is that as you create a more connected network, you end up increasing this thing called homophily, which is basically birds of a feather flock together. And that's exactly what you see on Facebook at the moment. And you create these echo chambers, and it doesn't really matter then in that echo chamber whether there is truth or not. And that's as a consequence of creating this interconnectedness. And it's something that needs to be thought about quite carefully. And that is the evolution of that they've done these studies in many places looking at home ownership, what happens racially within a specific area. And what tends to happen is that things evolve towards a segregated environment, unfortunately. And that is just, that you can do this with statistical models, and you see this time and time and time again, just based on slight biases that people exploit.
So can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Are you saying that it's almost an inherent quality of people with these things and technology just allowing us to see it more easily?
And it's facilitating it. And amplifying it.
And I think it was also a discussion, I'm going to be with you now, at the US Congress. They were actually talking about this because the big picture actually talked about the election and everything and the impact. And the scary thing is you think about AI, machine learning, deep learning, where you can have videos where they put words in your mouth, and it's not you saying that, and it's a danger. It looks authentic. So traceability stuff that you talked about, how do we address those type of things as well? Because you think it's real, but it's not real, and it's easy to fool a human. Easy. So So we've got so many big problems to crack in terms of that. But anyway, yeah, Selena, then.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the. So I'm Selena. I work with Megan at Ixio and helping with the competition platform that she mentioned. The flip side of this, I mean, talking about you know, the way AI is going to disrupt our lives and the way we get information, all of these things. I mean, I think part of the story is also that this is still in reality affecting only a certain segment of the population, particularly in South Africa or Africa more broadly. And I mean, AI runs on data, and I'm wondering what the panel thinks about how far are we to the point where an average person is actually their life is actually disrupted by AI, and this push for AI, is there a chance that if we let it go the way it wants to go, will it actually create a bigger gap where only certain people who have data-rich lives, who lead data-rich lives, are actually benefiting from AI?
That's a good question. No, go.
There's a good case study in China of that. So with Alipay and their credit scoring, but yeah, it's basically exclusionary. I mean, it really, really is. And I think, and it's also right. You know, your credit score is also linked to who you're friends with and things like that. So it's just a quick case study, but it's very, very worrying. And I think that as you know, the people creating a lot of the tech, we need to start really thinking of like, what are the applications and what are we actually getting involved in when we do this kind of thing.
I agree, and just to expand on that and to answer, I think the question that you asked in the beginning, I can recommend this white paper that they've written in India, which looks at a lot of these complexities and tries to balance the benefits that you can get from AI with the costs, both at the individual level and at the country level, and at all of these things. So it's well worth reading through that. I think you could probably find
please
it.
share.
I'll try and find it.
If you share, well, what I will do is via the Machine Intelligent Africa website, I'll share the presentations. I think you've got a presentation as well, if you want to. But we can share these kind of links so you can get it. There was a question there, and then Michael, yes, introduce yourself then. Andy, yeah.
The trust thing is a big one.
Yep.
So we're just getting more and more information. We have to try and compartmentalize it because we can't deal with the volume. We don't know whether we can trust it or not, so we're falling back into these simplification states. Hashgraph won't work, unfortunately. Not hashgraph, sorry. Blockchain. It consumes far too much resource. It's ridiculous. And also, you actually don't know until about an hour in after 6 blocks that set of blocks is going to stay on the blockchain. So it's a probability as to whether or not it's not going to work for micro transactions. Hashgraph is a better system. Lehman-Berg, Swirls, you can look at it yourself. It's a much lower power system and is certain. I think that we might be, I've been involved in computers since I was like 11 years old, programming machine code games on PET 2002 series stuff, and I did a degree in it and all the rest of it. I think we might be deluding ourselves into thinking that we can be part of this future of the AI. I think essentially we're creating new intelligence, if you like. To think that we would be in control of the AI is like us thinking that an abacus would be controlling a supercomputer. Unless we augment ourselves.
Elon Musk.
Well, yeah, unless we augment ourselves, we're not going to keep up with this space. So we're going to have to, I think we're going to end up in a system where the AIs are running it, basically. We kind of have to trust the AIs. And maybe that's what happens, because we can't trust people to do it. That's why we have the election systems. So maybe we're going to move to a system where we trust the AIs to look after us, as long as they're not at war as well, and trying to fight each other. But why would the AIs keep us around? You know, the history is that the most intelligent animal basically proliferates and the rest just die off. So, you know, maybe this brain here isn't going to be the most competent thing on the planet. And we see, to the Industrial Revolution thing, that's going to be happening in shorter and shorter periods. So in a lifetime, yes, but we're going to, I mean, the advent of quantum computers, the speed at which that's going to change, and then the speed of acceleration you're going to see, it's just going to outstrip our ability. Back to the abacus again, thinking it's in control of these things. I just don't think it's going to happen. So I think we have to kind of accept the fact that we're essentially creating the next generation Maybe we can be part of that. Maybe we can somehow put our consciousnesses into that space. We're going to move away from this as the mechanism.
Yep. And it comes back, there's obviously an assumption that we can create conscious beings, effectively.
Sure.
Yeah, so one needs to be, if you can still have, we already have super intelligence around us in a very narrow way.
Yeah.
But even if you get more, so it's going to be very interesting. This is how we need to shape it, because I think technology should serve us as much as possible. But there's maybe all part of that transition. So the danger is you can potentially create a human brain or a kind of more complex type of intelligence that could be conscious, and then you've got interesting stuff. All the stuff that you said is relevant.
Because the level of employment of intelligence that you're going to need for it to be employable is just rising.
True.
So unless we have a system of universal basic income, which is going to look after and essentially totally defocus, we won't be doing this rope running stuff. It will be more about things which make us feel better. And, we understand each other a lot more. We've got time for that. But what do we do productively in that environment? So why would they keep us around?
So you really are tapping into some quite important philosophical conversations, and it's around the meaning of life for human beings. And there is I believe, high probability that work. We always grew up believing that work was our meaning. That's where we got meaning. And we may need to recalibrate our thinking around what is meaning and what is our purpose. And that's going to be, that has massive social implications, because I was brought up in a world in which I looked after me, and then maybe one or two circles around me, and it was very much around that. And in future, we may need to be having a far more systemic view around how we're tapping into everything, and how we are really influencing everything. And that's a high-level view, and that we don't go with. But then what do we do? And AI is going to ask some very serious questions. The challenge is, if those control mechanisms are on that technology, the means of production, and that's starting to get into fewer and fewer people's hands, what are the implications of that? Do we have the Philosopher King's model again? Or how do we handle this new emerging? And the challenge is moving quite quickly, and I'm not necessarily sure that we are able to socially adjust quick enough without, as I was saying, that traumatic transition, which often creates the break and then the move. And I don't know if this is an incremental possibility. I think there's going to be a break, and there could be a significant something that happens linked to a war, linked to something that's going to fundamentally break systems, and something else has to emerge. And I think it's a possibility, a real possibility.
If the companies just end up just taking out more and more people, you're just going to get a complete disenfranchised set of people. So they are going to have some sort of resource access. Otherwise, there's going to be a revolution in that space.
I think it's a whole big discussion just on that. You maybe want to say something about, because I would love to go into more details there. There's more to say there, but Michael's got a question, and you've got a question as well. And Camilla, we've got 5 minutes. Because you want to, do you have a little bit more?
Excuse myself.
No, that's fine.
Please carry.
Okay, good. So it's fine. But the coffee is ready.
I've made fresh coffee and tea, and there's a few muffins left.
Okay, awesome. Okay, good. Thanks, Camilla. Okay, so let's quickly, that's Michael first.
Hey guys, I'm Michael Stanley from Pitfalls. So this taps a little bit into what Ryan was saying earlier, and very much in line with this conversation, to say if we allow society to just continue in a natural way, we can talk about the big companies harboring all this stuff, but at the end of the day, they're driven by users, and users will dictate how the world goes forward. Ironically, even if I was a customer service representative, I would desperately not want to speak to another customer service representative from another country. I'd far rather use an AI. Let's say if we had Alexa and she could sort out our problems, I'd far rather work with her, because I know that the current experience is completely broken. I'm feeling better about this now because I've been weeks in the process. If I could speak to an AI, I would choose to speak to one. Like, I know at the moment bots have some problems, but we realize it will get better, and that will be able to solve my problem very quickly. So I, as a user, will dictate that big company should use bots rather than even have augmented humans. I'd far rather have bots because they are faster and always available. So that says, I love the idea of the augmentation thing, but necessarily we're going to have a guiding hand. Again, we'll have to have a source of truth that tells us, either a government that says you need to employ X number of human beings at your revenue levels, or perhaps it'll be a more natural evolution to say it'll be corporate social responsibility, just in the way that I'll buy a more expensive fee range because it's better for humanity. Maybe a company will be, their value proposition will be, we employ humans, and as a result you should work with us. And we know that there's big markets for that, but honestly, rather than speak to bots, and it's better, take the pain to speak to the human, but it's better for society. And I wonder if that'll be a natural evolution of saying, this is where employment comes from, and saying, we're the good guys, and you'll buy from us as a result.
That's a good point, yeah. Awesome. Just one question, then another question, and then Charles, you're next. Yeah.
I'm going to be reading and ask you then very briefly.
That's good.
My name's Lisa. I'm coming at this from a very non-technical point of view. So I'm a search consultant. I specialise in corporate communications. So my question firstly is from a human capital point of view. I know that there was a big summit in Joburg recently about AI in HR. And I wonder what the panel's kind of just top-line thoughts on how AI is currently being used by bigger, not just big organisations, but organisations in general, in terms, from a human capital point of view, in terms of sourcing talent, retaining talent, nurturing talent, developing talent.
Fantastic. I actually was at that presentation. I did a keynote address there, and the presentation is on the Machine Intelligence Africa website.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we didn't do a video of that, but the presentation is there with some rich content around this. I also have one of the companies in the Cortex Logic portfolio is called the Talent Index. It's an AI platform for human capital valuation. Working with Alexander Forbes, rolling that out countrywide, almost 2,000 customers, working very specifically with corporates as well, looking at life cycle, employee life cycles, resignation risk, bringing in all sorts of different things, in their health risk, all sorts of different things. So there are active work being done on that. So there's some rich information there. But there's also quite a bit of startups, other companies looking at various aspects of recruitment. You see all these kind of apps coming to the fore. So, and I've actually in that presentation listed a range of that as well. So
yeah, and I was saying what I find interesting is that the AI that is being adopted is optimization AI. So it is allowing you to find candidates quicker, match them easier, have digital conversations where facial recognition is actually working out already personality and doing a whole lot of interpretive stuff. The bottom line though is we are optimizing an old model, which is I'm still looking for an individual to do a job. So what I kind of have a counter view is to say, let's start with the end in mind. What is that job? What is this human being needing to do? And you could find them perfectly. They still arrive and they ask to do mechanistic roles, which are going to kill them. Can't we start with that and use AI to stop them having to do that? Then find the right people to add, look at right brain, look at other behavioral components that then shape who we place in what role. And so that was just my take on it. Is AI is currently being used largely to optimize a current model. And I'm pushing it to say it is actually transformational. We have to look at this in a transformational light and say fundamentally the human role changes. How do we now apply AI? And that's my view.
And also the other problem is like a lot of the things in HR are just perpetuating these biases and these bad recruiting, because of the model that you're building, how you build up, how you build it.
Charles, you want to maybe react and then?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with what you guys are saying. I'm not as familiar with HR. I've heard that there are models. But the one thing I did just want to say that is just go back one conversation that Ryan was alluding to is that there's a lot of echoes of, I don't know if anyone here has read Thomas Piketty's Capital, which was basically the disconnect between the price of labor and the returns on labor and returns on capital and how that's been increasing. And that generally gets reset by a war. And the Second World War was the last one that reset that, and that was basically the reason for a fairly wealthy sort of 60s and 70s generation as compared to now where there's much more strain on labor income. And there's probably a similar thing happening with AI and holding AI, and who holds the data, and that the return on data is going to increase much faster than the return on labor.
Absolutely. No, that's an excellent point. Question?
Sorry, I'm AJ. I work as a value competition. So actually, I'm just kind of interested more but based on my experience on the aspect of the machine learning and bioinformatics. So currently we're working on the MIPT, which is like non-invasive prenatal testing. So what really happens is most times the patient will go to the doctor, and the pregnant woman that has a heavy pregnancy, and maybe the pregnant woman is having a kind of problem with the baby. So the doctor will find out, like take the blood sample and try to say, okay, we want to find out whether your baby is actually having a kind of a particular genetic disease. So for them to be able to carry out, the doctor doesn't really understand the technology. So what we do is we take the blood sample of the patient and we send it to the lab. Then we do some kind of sequencing, which comes back to the genome. And then the sequencing have to turn, and the blood have to generate to the DNA kind of just for layman understanding. So we have the ATG, whatever, the DNA sequence. Then specifically, what I'm kind of interested in that we have some bunch of developer engineering testing later. So what they do is they have their own machine learning kind of algorithm that they design. That when we do the sequencing, then we send the sample that we do the sequencing, we send it on the cloud. Then we now use that to test for the Down syndrome or a monosomic kind of a disease on that kind of a baby. Then the result will come back and say, okay, whether it's positive or it's negative. So now, my worry was that this patient doesn't really know about the technology. The doctor doesn't really know about the technology. They will base our judgment based on the result on whether it's positive, which is high risk, or it's low risk, which is negative. Then when we give back the result to NASA, which is the pathology, then they make a judgment and give the result back to the doctor. But at the end, the question is just still goes back to the data we generate. We have the data sitting here in South Africa, but also we upload, each day we upload not less than 14 gig of data every day to the cloud. Now, that comes back to me that how do we actually, the policy in terms of like how we maintain the data. In other words, because I do ask the question that, okay, when we send this data to the cloud, how we kind of like, in terms of marketing, are you not using our data to market this thing? Or, okay, I do know that, okay, any simple mistake I make when I'm doing when I'm carrying out the computational, maybe I just change one of the letter, then that can be an effect whereby the patient can be like, it can come back as a result of negative. Then human, we don't trust the system. Somehow we still need the professional of the clinical genetics that needs to sit down and give a proper result. And it's okay, yes, we make a call, but then we still need you to verify in terms of like giving the results to the patient. We can trust the technology in terms of what the result comes, the machine learning discover, detect everything, giving us an accuracy of 99%, but then we can't 100% still put our trust and say, okay, this is it. But then we need the clinical genetics to be able to make a call and say, okay, this is the result. Then based on what we study, based on research, this is what we give out to the doctor, and then they give it to the patient. So in a way, the technology is kind of saving life, which is this aspect of the AI and the machine learning, because I could see where the application is kind of being used. But in Africa, we don't really have the expertise in terms of like people actually trying, even in the aspect of data science, even currently in South Africa, the bioinformatics field is very young. Though it's trying to come up, people talk about data science, people talk about machine learning, but really we're not looking at the X sector, of which there's so much in the X sector that we just don't know that when it comes to cancer research, in terms of like when we have to do the prostate cancer for the men of Africa, we don't really know much about what is going on. Then this old technology can actually be implemented in this area of it. Then at the end, we have more results in Africa.
But so fantastic. What's your name again? Say again your name. AG. So we need to connect, because the good news is we're addressing that problem. So from a Cortex side, we're working with Professor Musa Mslanga, UCT. Where are you located?
Yeah, I work with Professor Ale.
Where? Right?
I'm actually working on Salary at the CPGR.
CPGR, Dr. Ryan Hiller.
Yeah.
Are you part of? Okay, so we are working with him as well. So we're looking at CPGR, Artisan Biomed.
Yeah.
Are you working with that? Yep. So they are part of this. Musa Mslanga as well. We're working with Next Biosciences. We're talking about this, putting the AI, the domain expertise, the sequencing, and the whole system to market in place. So it's kind of a joint venture. So we are working with that, and not only that, the South African Medical Research Council, which is working with the Beijing Genome Institute, Microsoft in terms of the Azure. So there's a bunch of stuff happening actively on that, and locally all the expertise, AI, data science, genomics. With Professor Musa Mslanga, he's focused on oncology, so we're looking at that. But so we're already working with Ryan Hiller, so I've spent some time with CPGR, so that's awesome.
I mean, it's a concern for me, because I feel like, yeah, we do have a lot of, like the academic education, we have people, but
absolutely,
we're not really utilizing the knowledge.
I agree, so that's a gap.
Really utilizing it. Because when we look at Africa correctly, I still feel like there's so much gaps in Africa.
Absolutely. That's the opportunity.
So there's just so much opportunity that we can actually create, and at the end, outside that, which is whatever, they can tap into the knowledge that we're actually creating the domain here. That would really.
I'm so much behind that, and for me, if you think about Africa, education is very important, financial inclusion, you were involved in before as well. Healthcare is so important, so we are very actively focused on that, and networking together all the critical resources and looking at the whole ecosystem. Also all the universities, so there's discussion with UCT, Stellenbosch, BITS, talking about all the hospitals as well, and trying to link it all up. So the healthcare information exchange, there's so many discussions going on. And government, so a lot of moving parts, it's tricky. You need visionary leadership to make it work, but there are things happening in that regard. But it's a very valid point. Okay, so just quickly, any further comments, questions? Because I think we've got 7 minutes, so we probably want to network. If there's any questions, so let's take a last questions, and then we can talk there, the coffee and the muffins and stuff, and we can continue the discussion.
I just had one extra comment about, so we can have all the technical ability we want, but if we're behind on data sets, what use is that? So our first thing we need to sort out is collaborative and inventive, like you said, open data sets that, or maybe not fully open, but at the moment they're fragmented. There's not a source. For example, and things where we're so behind, where we need to sort out before we get to machine learning, like infrastructure, transport infrastructure. I mean, that has a big impact on inclusion of different races, etc. If rich people have cars and can get anywhere like that, poor people don't have public transport in this country, then so those sort of problems need to be sorted out first. And if we can actually capture all the data that comes through a working system like that, then we can actually use AI to make it a smart technology. But we're on the back foot. There's definitely, like you said, gaps.
Massive gaps.
We're almost forced to need to get government on board to do any of this, because the private sector doesn't have the capabilities to coordinate this stuff.
Absolutely, we all need to work together. Even from a Cortex side, we're always thinking about creating those smart data layers. You can't even apply AI properly if you haven't got the infrastructure sorted out. So the infrastructure is for us, very important. It's part of an end-to-end solution. So we've got to sort that out. And with regards to healthcare, we're looking at a healthcare data platform for Africa as well. We've got proper data governance, privacy by design, everything built in. And you can create your app store, you create this multi-sided platform ecosystem really around this. So this is the potential, and then as Africans, we control that better. So I think that's what we're working with, but that's infrastructure, as you say.
Yeah, just one thing with the data sets. I think what would go a long way towards making more data sets available is a clearer regulatory framework on how data can be released and done in an ethical way. At the moment, there's very little guidance on that, so I don't blame private companies for not releasing those data. Just there's very little upside for them, and just massive downside.
But are there groups that are putting pressure on the government to kind of, I don't know, collaborate with?
So one group that I've been, so for example, mobile phone data could be very useful, right? You could use that for a number of things. There's no upside for a mobile phone company at this point to release those data. There's an organization called DAO, Digital Impact Funds, and they're trying to create a business case that actually makes it feasible for mobile network companies to release those data under whatever conditions they might be in. There are a bunch of different licenses. But part of that is going to have to be the government buying into it and saying, yes, we think under such and such a regulatory framework, these data can be made available for the common good. But without that, there's no way a mobile phone network is going to release those data. They're just going to get.
Should there be pressure, sort of urge to, or do you think it's their right to withhold it?
But they can't release it at the moment because it's personal information. So
yeah, but there are ways of withholding it.
So those are not. So you have to. So there was an orange data set that was released in Senegal, and there were a number of concerns raised about. Those were anonymized data. There were a number of concerns raised by people about the fact that you could actually identify people. For example, in a small village, there might only be like 5 people that have a cell phone. So if you can geolocate those people, then you can find that person, and then you can unravel all of this anonymization. So there needs, maybe that is a problem, maybe that isn't. That's a discussion that people need to have. But without that discussion, the mobile phone company, which is the one I'm using as an example, is never going to release those data because they're just going to get nailed.
If I can jump in, we've actually just built a data science program with the African Leadership University in Mauritius. And it's like this industrial internet program to teach African data science and with quite a strong IoT angle, but we've really struggled with data sets. So it's like, how do you teach create this program? It's just one of it. I mean, some of it we called it data masking. So we basically taken these overseas data sets and created African problems around them for case studies and things like that. But really clean data, and we wanted a lot of different industries, and it was extremely difficult. I mean, it was the biggest challenge was data, not even creating the coding.
I think that's the problem, because I also imagine you're finding a disease. You're not looking at Africa, or you're looking at outside and trying to match what is outside and trying to justify that or give an answer that this is how. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
No, I agree with you.
If I'm from other Africa, from Nigeria, I should be able to have my own genome sequence in such a way that when I'm finding my disease, I should be able to look at my own data.
Absolutely.
And then make an inference from them, not outside and say, okay, because I'm black, let's look at Black America.
Yeah, where's all the Nigerians in Black America? No, I'm with you there, 100%. So hopefully we can address that. But that's the opportunities that we've got here. And we need to move quickly because it's... anyway, I think... I just wanted to conclude, but there's another question. Yes, no, so go for it. Say again? Yes,
I'm here actually to learn about the impact of AI on cybersecurity.
Oh yes, very important area.
And
we should talk afterwards as well. Yeah.
Something that I've had great ideas here, and it's mind blowing. But if you can just touch on areas like using machine learning, to model network behaviors, and perhaps improve threat detection. If you can just think around that.
That's such important. It's a big topic at the US Congress. They talked about obviously cybersecurity is massive. We talk about war and stuff, but really that's a big area of that one needs. Where is a big application for AI. So we are also working with PwC on cybersecurity, vulnerability management, service type of solutions and stuff, and that's a huge area. And you combat things. It's also some of the biggest pitfalls, the areas of concern, and that one needs to look at. Big cyber. If you think about data privacy, but you've got cyber security, you've got very smart systems that can just hack into your system, create havoc. You can crash systems. So it's such an important area that needs to be addressed. Big, massive, but so we've got a work cut out. So I don't know. Don't know if you've got comments. I see there's a question at the back. Any comments on that?
Oh yeah, I think let's take it to coffee.
Go. Let's take it to coffee. One question, coffee, because it's 12 o'clock.
I want to know, is the PwC stuff just in the research phase, or is the actual?
No, they're providing currently manual services to companies and stuff around vulnerability management as a service, and so it's still in discussions. So yeah, so we haven't implemented anything.
And the work we do with frauds?
But it's not a fault. Yeah, we've got a system, an actual system that's working and everything, and evolving that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then do you guys do the development?
Yeah, we do. No, we do everything end to end. Great. Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Coffee there, tea. Let's continue the discussion there. I'm just going to switch off this thing. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
I've got a meeting